Chapter 18 The Joust. Your Majesty, Duke and Duchesses, Counts and Countess, Barons and Baronesses, Lords and Ladies, Knights and Damsels, Lads and Lasses, Yeomen and Serfs, Peers of the Realms, and whom did I miss? Students from the XXX school. Let's the games begin. Standing in the middle of the stadium and dressed in a suitably bright and ballooning-stained outfit, the announcer, or master of arms as he introduced himself, lowered his bullhorn and raised a trumpet to his lips. In the real Renaissance, I don't think they would have had porta-potties next to the royal stands, complained Max Ernest, who was sitting in said stands next to Cass. The porta-potties were directly behind them, and the smell was distinctly unpleasant. Trust me, in the real Renaissance, it was worse, said Cass. People just went wherever they wanted to. Gross. How do you know where people went in the Renaissance anyways? Asked Max Ernest. Oh right, I forgot. Actually, you're right. How do I know? I don't know anything anymore, said Cass grimly. What do you mean? What's wrong? Asked Max Ernest. He had seen Cass in many moods in the past, but never in a self-doubting one. It was disturbing his sense of order. Cass shrugged. Nothing. I don't mean anything. She wasn't about to tell Max Ernest the true reason behind her state of mind. Not today, anyways. If she told him about her experience, or the non-experience with the seer, he would probably rush her to the hospital. As I spoke, about 20 knights on horseback, or men and women dressed as knights on horseback, I should say, rode into the ring. Each wore a number over his or her breastplate, and each held a flag, some representing nations, others representing local businesses or bowling leagues. Ladies and gentlemen, I now present the finest knights in the kingdom, declaring the Master of Arms. They have come from all over the country, indeed from all over the world, to compete in a contest of skill and will. The winner will be honored by the Queen herself. He proceeded to introduce the contestants, each of whom had adopted a grand title for the occasion: Sir Daniel the Daring, Sir Michael of Moors, Lord Philip the Fair, and so on. Cass and Max Ernest applauded when they heard Yo-Yoji announced. And here, from feudal Japan, comes Sir Yo-san, the samurai knight. Yo-Yoji roared into the ring in a festive, feisty black horse. He was well dressed in traditional European style armor, a couple sizes too big, but holding a samurai sword and carrying a Japanese style flag, decorated with what I can only describe as some sort of anime alien, or perhaps it was meant to be one of Cass's sock monsters. As his horse pawed the ground and jerked his head this way and that, Yo-Yoji squirmed on his saddle. He looked as if he might fall off before the games even begin. Since when does Yo-Yoji know how to joust anyways? Asked Cass. He doesn't. I don't even think he knows how to ride a horse, said Max Ernest, but he knows all about swords from all those kendo lessons with Lily. Plus his samurai experience, remember? Oh great. I'm sure this will be a piece of cake then. Quiet, the Queen speaks. Hush fell over the crowd. Miss Johnson stood up in the royal box. Loyal subjects, we thank you from the bottom of our royal heart for being here today on the great occasion, she said, attempting to maintain her English accent as she shouted into the bullhorn. Brave knights, who among you will be our champion? To earn our patronage, you must have the courage of a lion and the cunning of a fox, the eyes of an eagle and the ferocity of a wolf, the heart of a bear and the mind of, well, never mind. May the best man win. The crowd clapped and cheered. Long live the Queen. I regret to say Yoji's first effort was not obstatious. Despite his valiant samurai experience, he passed by the quaint entirely and thrown off his horse and wound up pole vaulting over his lance. A neat trick, but hardly a way to earn points in a hostility. On the off chance that you have never competed in any medieval tournaments, I should tell you that the word quaint here refers to the target in which the knight aims their lance. The hostility, meanwhile, is the kind of military-style game that was undertaken in the Middle Ages, most especially a joust. Happily, he was able to stand up immediately afterwards, a bit bruised, but mostly unscathed. The audience laughter was, as you can imagine, uproarious. Soon, however, the games turned from military to showmanship to direct combat. Now, on foot, the knights competed in a round-robin and hand-to-hand matchups featuring a variety of weapons, including not only swords, but flails, battle axes, spears, all of course, stage props and not real weapons. This was, after all, not a real knights tournament, but a stage event in the Fox Renaissance Fair. I am pleased to inform you that Yoyoji's performance improved greatly with every matchup. Highly trained in martial arts, Master Lily Wei, Yoyoji was light on his feet and extremely defiant with the sword and flail especially. He had an unerring instinct for when to thrust and when to parry, and when to leap over the head of his opponents, or while not literally leap over the head, but he did jump quite high considering the weight of his armor. By the time the knights were supposed to remount their horses, Yoyoji's score, previously the lowest, qualified him for the final round of jousting, the result of which would determine who would become the Queen's champion. The competition had come down to 4 contestants. Compared to the first round of quints, the targets were smaller and the stakes were higher, but lucky was on Yoyoji's side. The first of 4 contestants seemed to be loose his grip on his lance and last mount, so that he barely grazed the quint and earned the low score of 4. The second contestant, fighting a gust of wind, missed his target entirely. Yoyoji was next, and the master-armed whistled sound. Yoyoji spurred his horse. This time he sat firmly in his saddle with a clear he intended not to be thrown off again. He held his lance straight, connecting near the center of the quint, and earning him more than respectable 9 out of 10 points. A moment later the whistle sounded once more, and the 4th contestant was about to make his move when suddenly his horse bucked as if spooked by something. An unfortunate knight was thrown to the ground. While he shouted for his horse to stop, the horse tore off in the direction of the stables, kicking up a cloud of dust in the wake. It's possibly Yoyoji won by default? Asked Cass. Before Max Ernest could answer, there was a shout and cries from the other end of the stadium. Like everyone else in the audience, Cass and Max Ernest turned to see what was causing all the commotion. "Is this part of the show, right?" asked Max Ernest. A hitherto unseen knight had charged into the ring, his tall horse reeling. He broke through the ranks of the other knights, causing their horses to buck and rear in turn. He seemed to have an agitating effect on everyone present, whether equine or human. "You on the great horse, what are you doing here?" cried the Master of Arms. "The tournament is for people who have reserved a spot only. I'm sorry, you have to leave the ring immediately." But the mysterious knight did not leave. On the contrary, he reined his horse and settled in the center of the stadium. A picture he created was unnerving, to say the least. Whereas all the other knights wore brand new armor that sparkled in the sunshine, he was clad head to toe in dark, rusty sheets of steel that reflected no light, even though the horse he was standing was full sun. A medieval-style helmet masked his entire face, a single narrow slit enabling him to see but not be seen. Scaled like gauntlets covered his hands and forearms, giving him the quality of a dragon's talons. He wore steel boots on his feet that looked heavy enough to sink a ship. His horse, meanwhile, was good 5 or 6 hands taller than the other horses, with a great deal wilder look. Please, can somebody escort this man out of here? The Master of Arms was gesturing in all directions. A handsome silver-haired man dressed as a Renaissance porter with a wide ruffled collar and black boots walked up to him and whispered in his ear. "Beg your pardon, ladies and gentlemen, there may be a change in plans," announced the Master of Arms after a moment, obviously very flustered. The new entrant called himself the Unknown Knight. I am told he represents the Queen's cousin, Mary Queen of Scots. As he said this, the Unknown Knight bowed towards the woman standing in the box opposite of Miss Johnson. She was pale and beautiful and dressed in sparkling white gown, much finer than, it must be said, than Miss Johnson's. Then showed off her Barbie doll thin waist, tilted her head ever so slightly in acknowledgement. The Master of Arms turned towards Miss Johnson. "Your Majesty, this is highly irregular, but according to this gentleman, your cousin's request that we make an exception for her champion." "Very well, the Unknown Knight shall joust with the winner of the previous contest," declared Miss Johnson, playing along with the regal fashion as she could muster. "It saddened us to say it, but we have just learned that Mary Queen of Scots has been plotting against us. She would take her own cousin's life so that she might be queen. The joust will settle our feud." Mary Queen of Scots did, in fact, famously plot against her cousin Queen Elizabeth via secret coded messages hidden in wine barrels. Unlucky for Mary, Elizabeth's secretary happened to be England's primary spy and codemaster. He cracked the plotter's code and double agent monitored their communications. In the end, Mary's fate was not settled via joust. However, she was found guilty of conspiring to kill the queen, and she was executed. As the quarter joined the woman identified as Mary Queen of Scots, the audience booed and hissed the group good-naturedly. "Down with the traitor from France, long live the Queen." Most of the audience seemed to assume the final joust had been pre-planned, but the nervous face of Master of Arms suggested otherwise. Max Ernst frowned, watching. "Do they look familiar to you?" "Why, who do you think they are?" asked Cass cautiously. She had recognized the Count Quarter and Mary Queen of Scots right away, as though she had no longer trusted her own perception. "Miss Mavis and Dr. L. Who else?" Cass nodded. "That's what I was thinking, but why? What are they doing here?" "I know it doesn't make any sense. Who do you think the new knight is?" Cass looked down at the knight standing in like a shadow in the sun. She felt a strange, familiar chill. "I don't know. Should we warn Yoyogi?" "It's too late. The final joust was beginning." While Yoyogi and the Unknown Knight sat on their horses opposite ends of the field, the Master of Arms explained the rules of the joust. 500 years ago, he said, knights would continue fighting on foot once they were unhorsed and dueled to the death. Today, however, we will consider unhorsing your opponent to equal a win. He addressed Miss Johnson once more. "Your Majesty, will you bless the field that these men may duel?" Miss Johnson nodded somberly and raised her hand in benediction. It was hot inside the armor. Yoshi could hear himself breathing in his mask and could even, he thought, hear his heart beating beneath the breastplate. Sweat dripping into his eyes, but with one hand on his lance and the other holding his shield, and at the same time the reins of the horse. There was no way to wipe his face. The tournament was taking far too long. He wanted a shower. He forced himself to concentrate on the task at hand. It was difficult to see or hear very much under his helmet. He had no idea who the new knight was or where the knight had come from. Only that they were meant to joust each other. Was I really supposed to unhorse him, Yoyogi wondered? What if his opponent got hurt? What if Yoyogi got hurt? He had been lucky the last time he landed on the ground. What if this time was different? The whistle blew. He wasn't aware of the urging his horse forward only for the sound of the pounding hoofs below, the rush of the wind on his side of his helmet. In the mere second he had the mysterious knight was closing in on each other. But for Yoyogi there was something surreal and slow motion-like about the moment. He found his eyes drawn inexorably towards his opponent. At the very least, Yoyogi had been able to see the other knight's eyes above their masks. But when he tried to catch a glimpse of the mysterious knight's eyes, he only saw shadow. He could see nothing of the knight, not even a silver of his neck or wrist. Only armor and chainmail. The crowd fell silent, everyone waiting breathlessly for the inevitable collision. In a brief race, Yoyogi had lost crucial time. His opponent's lance was aiming straight for him. From Yoyogi's perspective, it looked like an oncoming arrow. It was too late for him to try and land a blow. All he could do was try and protect himself. Just in time, he lurched to the side and raised his shield, deflecting the lance with a loud screech. The crowd cheered. Yoyogi shuddered, a delayed reaction he had never missed. As his horse headed automatically for the far side of the stadium, Yoyogi glanced down at his shield. The deep gorge in the gleaming surface confirmed that he had what he had seen. This mysterious knight's lance had been real. All the other lances, including his own, had a little ball at the tip. The opponent's had been needle sharp. Only Yoyogi's instinctive lurch to the side had saved him. An inch or two in one direction or another, and he would have been impaled. It was impossible for the other knight to be intentionally trying to kill him. Or was the knight just so determined to win that he was indifferent to whether Yoyogi lived or died? Turning his horse around, Yoyogi noticed that he was no longer sweltering hot. His sweat was turning clammy and his armor was cold to the touch. Is this what it's like to be afraid? He thought. He didn't know what to do. Bow out, Casamaxers would be so disappointed. But they wouldn't want him to risk getting killed, would they? Shivering, he looked over at the Master of Arms to see if he noticed anything awry. But the stain-clad man was raising his whistle to his lips, about to signal another round. Just then was a shout from the royal box. Halt! The shouts must stop. It's the school's secretary, Opal. She was still in costume as Lady Fool. She pointed to Yoyogi. I just recognized the boy. He is a student at our school and not allowed to participate in the tournament. Yoyogi dismounted and removed his armor immediately. There was chaos, and the Master of Arms verified that the secretary was saying, then hurriedly declared the unknown knight the winner. When Casamaxers caught up with Yoyogi, he was out of his armor, standing in the guardrails. The secretary grappled him by the arm as if he was a little boy likely to run off. You're right, that was totally against the rules, Yoyogi, to be in this. Are you taking him to see the principal? Asked Maxers hopefully. I'm sure Miss Johnson will deal with him just as soon as she's done with that night, said Opal, nodding. She nodded to the other side of the field where the unknown knight, still unseen under his helmet, waited on his horse for the winning circle. With the Master of Arms, Miss Johnson strode regularly towards him, a blue ribbon in her hand. Oh, that's too bad, said Cass. You know, we knew Yoshi entered the competition, but we didn't say anything, so we should be in trouble too. The secretary raised her eyebrows. Is that right? Sir Unknown Champion of Mary Queen of Scots, said Miss Johnson, speaking to the Master of Arms Bullhorn. With this ribbon we bestow upon our royal favor. She raised the ribbon in the air to the unknown knight. When his gauntlet-covered hand reached down, however, he didn't take it. Instead, he yanked the lodestone pendant off her neck from the unsuspecting principal. Well, I'd never, she shrieked. Are you crazy? Straightening himself once more on his horse, the knight laughed, a hollow, echoing laugh that sounded as if it came from the depths of his rusty old armor. Go, he shouted, on his horse spurting it forward. Miss Johnson screamed and pointed. Thief! Thief! Stop him! That man took my necklace! Thief! At the edge of the field, the knight unexpectedly reined his horse and looked back over his shoulder. The frantic Miss Johnson kept shouting, Guards, security, somebody, do something, arrest him. Cass knew it was unlikely, but she felt certain that the night was looking at her. She thought again of the awful possibility that had occurred to her earlier. There was no way, or was there? Then, as the crowd watched, aghast, the knight galloped off to the stadium and right hand raised, dangling the lodestone like a prize. As soon as the unknown knight disappeared, Miss Johnson turned her ire to Miss Marvis and Dr. L, or Mary Queen of Scots, in her corner. As she knew them, they were sitting unexpressionlessly in their front row box, watching events unfold. You and you, I mean we, spurted the furious Miss Johnson, still trying to maintain her character as Queen Elizabeth. We don't know what you think you're doing, getting at entering the maniac like that in this competition, but you're not leaving until he returns my necklace. She pointed to the unformed royal guards lined up in the front of them. Guards, seize our traitor cousin and the awful counter of hers this instant. The guards didn't move. Miss Mavis stood slowly, her dress glittering in the sunlight. Seemingly without trying, she looked 10 times the Queen, Miss Johnson did. Please spare us your theatrics, Your Majesty, or should I say, Madam Principal. The Queen should not have to shout in order to be heard. Indeed, although Miss Mavis' voice was but an icy whisper, it could be heard all across the stadium, as if it was being carried by the cold breeze. She gestured to Dr. L, who stood and bowed. I'm afraid, my porter and I must refuse your invitation. We have pressing business to attend to, a kingdom to build. You might say that we simply cannot be detained. And now I have a message for a certain extremely meddlesome little girl here today. Miss Mavis looked directly at Cass. Darling, it's over. You and that ragtag bunch of circus freaks have lost. We hope to never see you and your friends again. But rest assured, if we do, it will be for the last time. It's no longer just us merely mortals you will have to contend with. Our master has returned, and he will not be stopped. Guards. Miss Mavis snapped her white-gloved fingers, and the guards, who had ignored Miss Johnson only moments earlier, they immediately stood at attention and saluted. Cass and Max Ernest, Yo-Yoshi gasped involuntarily. All the guards were wearing white gloves. Friends, Miss Mavis snapped her fingers again. Suddenly, the entire crowd of people behind her stood up and revealed that they too were all wearing white gloves. They raised their hands in unison and made the single sweeping gesture. Then in silence descended into the field and fled out of the gates behind Miss Mavis and Dr. L. All three heroes stared after them. It was like watching a flock of seagulls raise from the beach and disappear into the horizon. Only in this case, the seagulls might as well be described as birds of prey.